The night air was thick with humidity and headlights. Somewhere along Route 18, just outside Atlanta, a pair of blue and red lights exploded through the darkness. Pull over now. The loudspeaker barked. The order shattered the calm like a gunshot. The black sedan eased to the shoulder, its tires crunching against gravel. Inside, Malcolm Ross, 42, exhaled slowly. He'd been through this dance before too many times for a man who'd done nothing wrong. He cut the engine, rolled down his window, and placed both hands on the steering wheel, the way his father had taught him, the way every black father teaches his son. Keep your hands visible. Don't reach for anything. Smile if you can. A flashlight beam seared his eyes before the officer even reached the window. Evenin', sir, Malcolm began carefully. The officer's voice sliced back. Don't move, boy. Step out of the car now, boy. The word hung in the humid air like poison. Malcolm blinked, momentarily blinded. Officer, may I ask? Step out. The flashlight jabbed against his temple. Another cruiser screeched up behind them. Gravel sprang. 2 more officers emerged. Hands already resting on holsters, traffic slowed on the opposite side of the road, drivers craning to see what was happening. To them, it probably looked like a dangerous suspect being pulled off the highway. To Malcolm, it felt like another reminder that his skin color was still considered probable cause. He stepped out slowly, every muscle rehearsing obedience. Hands on the hood, the first cop snapped. Sir, I'm on my way too. I said hands on the hood. The metal burned against his palms. Sweat dripped down his neck. Name, barked the officer. Malcolm Ross. Spell it. MLL. Where you headed this late, Mr. Ross? Downtown? To a conference? What conference needs you driving a Mercedes at midnight? Another officer cut in. He was younger, smirking, twirling a baton like he'd seen it in a movie. It's not a Mercedes, Malcolm said quietly. It's a Genesis, and it's mine. The first cop snorted. Sure it is. Got any outstanding warrants, Mr. Ross? Any unpaid tickets? Ever been arrested before? No, sir. That's so, you look nervous. Because there are 3 guns pointed at me. That earned him a shove. Smart mouth, huh? A small crowd of onlookers had gathered now, their phones glowing like fireflies. The older cop turned to his partner. Run the plates. Let's see who our big money driver really is. Malcolm stood still, pulse hammering in his ears. He knew this feeling, the mix of fear and fury that had no safe outlet. His heart told him to fight back. His mind begged him to survive the next 5 minutes. The younger cop rifled through the car, tossing aside a laptop bag, a suit jacket, and a folder embossed with gold letters. He held it up, squinting at the seal. What's this? Some kind of fake government ID? The older officer grabbed it and read the embossed text aloud. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Counterintelligence Division, a snort. Yeah, right. You expect me to believe you're FBI. Malcolm's voice stayed level. You could radio in and confirm. Oh, we will, the cop said, grinning. And when this comes back fake, you're going to wish you'd never gotten out of bed. He tossed the ID onto the hood, just as the dispatch crackled to life. Unit 12. Plate check, coming and registered to Malcolm Ross. Government-exempt vehicle. Flag on record. Level 7 clearance. Federal operations. The older cop froze. The baton in the younger one's hand stopped mid-spin. Say that again? Dispatch, he muttered, voice suddenly tight. Confirmed, sir. Repeat vehicle and credentials. Belong to Special Agent Malcolm Ross, FBI Counterintelligence. Supervising officer logged in our system. Be advised. Command requests immediate confirmation of his status and condition. A silence heavier than the Georgia heat fell over the highway. Malcolm lifted his head slowly, eyes steady. Now, he said quietly, may I tell you why I was driving downtown? The officers' radios erupted again, overlapping voices. Agent Ross is en route to the joint task briefing. He's late by 10 minutes. Director wants confirmation he's secure. The smirking baton whirler's mouth fell open. The older cop swallowed hard. One of the phones recording from the roadside zoomed in on their stunned faces, and then a black SUV roared up behind the cruisers. Doors flew open. Men in dark suits stepped out, badges glinting under flashing lights. Agent Ross, sir, are you okay? One shouted. The crowd gasped. Cameras caught every frame, the officers' arrogance evaporating into panic. The FBI agents surrounding their superior, the look of realization crawling across their faces. The older cop stumbled back, words tumbling. Sir, we wouldn't realize you didn't ask. Malcolm replied quietly, for the first time all night. He smiled, but it wasn't forgiveness yet. It was the beginning of something far bigger. By morning, the video was everywhere. The headline on the local news site read, "Traffic stop turns into FBI shock. Officers detain federal agent," but that didn't even begin to capture what had happened. Every frame, from the flashlight glare to the moment the black SUVs arrived, had been recorded by a bystander, and in less than 8 hours, it had gone viral. Millions watched as MalcolmRoss.com/composed and humiliated stood surrounded by officers, who treated him like a suspect until the moment their radios screamed the truth. He hadn't even spoken publicly yet, but the internet already had. Proof that skin color still trumps credentials. Agent or not, this could have ended with a body bag. They didn't even try to ask for ID. By breakfast, morning talk shows were replaying the footage with grim expressions. One host wiped away tears as she said, "That man kept his composure better than most of us ever could." Meanwhile, Malcolm sat in silence in his apartment, the blinds drawn, phone buzzing nonstop, text after text. From friends, from colleagues, from journalists he'd never met, even his mother, retired schoolteacher from Montgomery, had called twice before dawn. "Baby, I saw it. I saw it on TV," she said, her voice trembling. "Are you okay? They had no right to do that to you." "I'm fine, Mama," he said softly. "I promise." But he wasn't fine. He felt stripped, not of his title, not of his badge, but of his dignity. The uniform he'd earned through 20 years of service suddenly felt like a costume. No one respected until they saw the label. He turned on the TV and saw his own face plastered across every channel. A talking head on one network said, "It's a clear case of racial profiling." The man identified himself as FBI, yet they assumed he was lying. Another added, "This could reshape national conversations on law enforcement bias." But Malcolm didn't want a conversation. He wanted quiet. He wanted to forget the way that officer had said boy. The way his hands had shaken, even though he'd done nothing wrong. And yet, he couldn't, because the FBI had already called him in. By 9 a.m., he was sitting in a polished conference room inside the Atlanta field office. The air too clean and too cold. Across from him sat Deputy Director Helen Grant, silver hair and a reputation sharper than any knife. "Agent Ross," she began. "First, I'm glad you're safe. We've all seen the footage. The Bureau is aware, and, well, the world is too." She folded her hands. "You handled yourself impeccably. No aggression, no escalation. You were a professional." He nodded, but said nothing. She continued, however, "This isn't just about you anymore. The director's office is fielding calls from the Attorney General, the governor, and about half the media outlets in the country." Her tone softened. "You've become a symbol, Malcolm. Whether you like it or not." "I didn't sign up to be a symbol," he said quietly. "I signed up to protect the country." Grant studied him. "Sometimes protecting the country means standing for what's right, even when it's personal." Malcolm looked down at his hands. "Those men were state officers. I don't want them destroyed over a mistake." "A mistake," her voice sharpened. "They assaulted a federal agent and racially profiled him on camera." He met her gaze evenly. "And if I demand their jobs, the next cop on the street will just learn to hide it better, not fix it." For a moment, she said nothing. Then, almost reluctantly, she leaned back. "So what do you want to do?" Malcolm exhaled. "I want to meet them." Grant blinked. "You what?" "I want to see them face to face, not for revenge. For something that might actually change something." Her eyes narrowed. "You're serious?" "I've been serious my whole life," he said. "They just never looked close enough to notice." By that evening, Malcolm's decision had leaked. Social media went from outrage to awe. "He's not pressing charges. He wants to meet them. That's grace I couldn't have." Man's showing more discipline than the whole department combined. At the precinct, the 3 officers were a wreck. Internal Affairs had suspended them pending investigation. Their phones had been disconnected after waves of threats, and now they were told they'd be meeting the man they humiliated. Officer Davis, the oldest, hadn't slept in 2 nights. He stared at the floor as the department's PR officer briefed them. "The Bureau wants a private conversation, off record, no cameras. You'll keep your badges until review, but this meeting may determine your future." "The young one," Officer Travis muttered, "he's probably coming to tear us apart." Davis shook his head slowly. If that's what he wanted, he'd already have it. The man's FBI. He's coming for something else. When Malcolm entered the room the next morning, it was dead silent. No suits, no press, no recording devices. Just 4 men and the weight of everything that had happened. The officers stood. Davis swallowed hard. "Agent Ross, we sit down," Malcolm said gently. They obeyed. For a long moment, he said nothing. He just looked at them, not with hatred, but with the kind of steady silence that makes a man face himself. Then he spoke. "You thought I was dangerous." No one answered. "You looked at my car, my skin, my calm, and assumed it meant guilt." Still silence. "And yet, the moment that radio called my name, everything changed. You didn't see me. You saw my title." He leaned forward. "The only difference between last night and this morning is that now you respect me." Davis's eyes glistened. "Agent Ross, there's no excuse. We were wrong." Malcolm nodded slowly. "I know," Travis blurted out. "I didn't mean to." "Yes, you did," Malcolm interrupted softly. "You didn't mean for the world to see it, but you meant it when you said boy." The younger man looked down. Face red. Malcolm continued, his tone still calm. "You have a choice now. You can treat this as humiliation, or as a lesson." He stood. "I don't need an apology. I need you to be different next time, because next time, the man you stop might not have a badge that saves him." For a moment, no one breathed. Then he turned to leave, but Davis called after him, voice shaking. "Agent Ross." "Sir, I've got a teenage son. He's mixed, half black, half me. And I swear to God, I never want him to see me the way the world saw me last night." Malcolm paused at the door. "Without turning," he said, "then make sure he doesn't have to." By that afternoon, someone leaked that meeting happened, though no one knew what was said, but word spread fast. The agent they'd profiled didn't seek revenge. He sought reform. And that made the story explode all over again.
The next morning, Malcolm's face was on every screen in America. News anchors didn't just report the story anymore, they felt it. The same clip played on a loop. Malcolm standing calm, hands visible, 3 police officers shouting over him. Then the sudden silence when the radio announced, "All units, the subject is Special Agent Malcolm Ross. Repeat, FBI Special Agent." That moment had frozen a nation. But it wasn't the arrest that went viral this time. It was the meeting. Word had leaked that Malcolm Ross, instead of pressing charges or demanding the officer's suspension, had requested a private conversation and left without saying a word to the press. No cameras, no drama, no revenge. Just silence. And somehow that silence roared louder than any speech. The morning show, America Today, opened with an anchor visibly emotional. "Most of us would have wanted payback," she said, shaking her head. "But Agent Ross, he chose restraint, dignity, grace. And maybe that's exactly what this country needs right now." Across social media, people began sharing the clip under the hashtag #HeChoseGrace. In just 12 hours, it hit 200 million views. Veterans shared it with captions like, "This is what leadership looks like." Mothers wrote, "I showed this to my sons. This is how you fight hate without losing your soul." Even celebrities joined in, praising the agent who refused to break under humiliation. But not everyone was celebrating. Some critics sneered. They said Malcolm had gone soft, that he should have used his position to make an example out of the officers. Others accused him of playing saint for the cameras. Malcolm ignored all of it. He wasn't interested in being a symbol or a martyr. He just wanted peace. But peace, it turned out, had other plans. At noon, his doorbell rang. When he opened the door, there were 5 black SUVs parked outside. Not media vans, not protesters. Federal. His heart sank. He thought he was being called back for another debrief. But when he stepped outside, an older man in a Navy suit extended his hand. "Agent Ross," the man said, "Director Palmer sent me. The President would like to speak with you." He blinked. The President?" "Yes, sir, right now." 2 hours later, he found himself seated in the Oval Office. The air was thick with the quiet hum of history, portraits of men who'd led wars, faced crises, made impossible decisions. And now, somehow, his story had brought him here. President Elaine Warren entered, calm, composed, but visibly moved. "Agent Ross," she said, taking his hand firmly, "you've done more for this country's soul in 48 hours than some of us manage in a lifetime." He shook his head. "Ma'am, I just did what I thought was right." She smiled faintly. "And that's exactly why you're here." They sat. Around them, advisors watched silently, tablets glowing with data, online engagement numbers, community responses, donation surges to police reform groups. The president continued, "You've become a flashpoint, not because of what was done to you, but because of how you responded. People are listening, even the people who usually don't." Malcolm frowned. "Listening to what exactly?" "To reason," she said simply, "to humanity, to the idea that dignity can win." She leaned forward. "I want you to help me lead a national task force. We're calling it the Bridge Initiative, a partnership between law enforcement, civil rights advocates, and youth leaders. You'd be the face of it." Malcolm hesitated. He wasn't used to spotlights. He'd spent years working behind the scenes, running intel, not interviews. "I appreciate that, ma'am, but I'm not a politician." The president chuckled softly. Neither am I some days, but you are a man who earned respect from both sides of a very divided nation, and that's something no law can manufacture." She stood. "Think about it. You don't have to decide today." Malcolm rose as well, still unsure whether to feel honored or overwhelmed. As he left the White House, reporters shouted questions, flashes lighting up the steps. "Agent Ross, are you joining the president's reform panel? Do you forgive the officers who profiled you? Are you planning to speak publicly?" He said nothing, just a small nod, calm, measured, the same composure that had carried him through humiliation and history. That evening, he returned home to find his mother sitting on the couch watching the replay. When she saw him, she stood up slowly. "Malcolm James Ross, my baby on national television." He smiled, sitting beside her. "I didn't ask for it, Mama." "I know, but maybe it's asking for you." She turned to him. "You remember what your father used to say? Sometimes the uniform ain't what makes the man. It's how he stands when they try to strip it off." Malcolm nodded, eyes glistening. "I remember." She took his hand. "Then stand tall, son. The world needs you to." Later that night, he opened his laptop and froze. There were hundreds of emails from teachers, from community leaders, from police departments asking him to speak. Even a message from a 10-year-old boy that simply read, "My dad said people like you don't exist, but I showed him your video. Now he says he was wrong." Malcolm sat there staring at the message, the words blurring through tears he didn't expect. He finally replied, "Thank you, kid. Keep proving him right." Then he leaned back, exhaling for the first time in days. The nation hadn't just seen him, it had felt him. And somewhere deep down, Malcolm realized something had shifted. Not just in the public, not even in the system, but in himself. He'd spent years enforcing laws. Now he was starting to write them, not on paper, but on hearts. The following week, Malcolm Ross learned what fame really felt like. It wasn't applause or praise, not the way people imagined it. It was noise, endless, suffocating noise. Cable networks dissected every second of his body cam footage. Pundits yelled over each other, assigning motives, rewriting his story to fit their agendas. Half the country called him a hero. The other half called him a prop. Some said he was too calm, that real men fought back. Others said he was too proud, that he made the officers look bad. Everyone had an opinion. Nobody asked him what his was. He tried to go back to work quietly, but even inside the bureau, whispers followed him like a shadow. Hallway conversations stopped 20 past. Some agents patted him on the shoulder, others refused to meet his eyes. He overheard one conversation in the break room that hit harder than he expected. "You know he's only getting attention because he's black, right? Man, I don't care what color he is. That guy handled it better than I ever could." The voices faded as he walked in. Both men went silent. Malcolm nodded politely, poured his coffee, and left. Every room felt smaller now. Every word carried double meaning. He'd become the story, and that meant everyone around him was part of it, whether they wanted to or not. By Thursday, invitations flooded his inbox. Morning shows, talk panels, TED conferences. Even a documentary team wanted exclusive access to the man who stayed calm under fire. He declined them all. He didn't want a spotlight. He wanted accountability, real change, not just headlines. But the world had other ideas. At 9:30 that night, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. You're being used. C." He stared at it for a long moment, wondering who it was. Then he typed back, "Who's this?" No reply. The next morning, he walked into his office to find a familiar face waiting for him. Cynthia Morales, a senior field agent and one of the Bureau's top analysts. Sharp, fearless, someone Malcolm respected long before this madness began. "Guessing you got my text," she said without preamble. "You?" I asked, exhaling. "You could have just called." She shrugged. "Wasn't sure you'd answer." "Fair point." She handed him a folder. "You're trending in 87 countries, Malcolm. Hashtags in 10 languages. That kind of exposure doesn't happen naturally. Someone's amplifying it." He frowned. "Amplifying?" she said. "Bots, coordinated shares, PR firms, politicians with agendas. Everyone wants a piece of you." He flipped through the data. Graphs, timestamps, message networks, all pointing to one thing. His story wasn't just viral, it was weaponized. Cynthia leaned against the desk. "Half the posts praising you are from accounts that don't even exist. They're pushing you as some kind of savior narrative." "And the other half?" "Calling you a fraud, a deep state puppet, you name it." He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "So now I'm both a saint and a conspirator." "Welcome to modern America," she said dryly. "They love you or they hate you. Nobody actually knows you." Malcolm closed the folder, his expression tightening. Then maybe it's time they did. That night he sat in front of his laptop again, but this time, instead of avoiding the noise, he opened the camera. He didn't script a speech. It didn't hire a PR manager. He just spoke. Most of you saw the video. You saw a man staying calm while the world lost its mind around him. But you didn't see the years before that, the nights I drove home wondering if I'd make it back at all, wearing the same badge people feared. He paused. The room was silent, except for the hum of his desk fan. "I've read your comments, all of them. The praise, the hate, the lies. But here's what I know. The truth doesn't need sides. It just needs space to breathe." He leaned forward, his eyes steady. "I didn't stay calm because I'm special. I stayed calm because if I didn't, I'd be another name on a list, a headline that fades by next week. I didn't want that for me or for you." His tone deepened, controlled but fierce. "So no, I don't want fame. I don't want pity. I want better. Better training, better empathy, better laws. Because respect shouldn't depend on a uniform or a title or a color. It should depend on character." He ended simply. "If you're listening, don't share my face. Share the message." He hit upload. Within hours, it hit 50 million views. But this time, the response was different. Raw, emotional, unfiltered. Teachers played it in classrooms. Pastors quoted it in sermons. Police officers, real ones, started sending him messages privately, thanking him for saying what they couldn't. "You spoke for all of us who want to do better. You made me rethink why I joined in the first place. You gave my son hope." The following week, something unexpected happened. A police chief from Alabama called him personally. He wanted Malcolm to lead a workshop on de-escalation and human dignity for his entire department. Then another city called, then another. Soon Malcolm found himself traveling state to state, not as an agent on assignment, but as a man on a mission. Everywhere he went, he met people desperate for someone to believe in. Cops who'd grown numb to violence, communities that no longer trusted the badge, kids who only saw uniforms as threats. Malcolm stood in each room, calm as ever, telling the same story. How you treat someone when you think they're powerless, that's who you really are. He didn't shout, he didn't accuse, he just told the truth. And people listened. For the first time in years, precincts that hadn't spoken civilly to community leaders were shaking hands after his sessions. Departments began drafting reforms inspired by his words, accountability measures, empathy-based training, mentorship programs pairing young recruits with local teens. Change was happening, slowly, quietly, but undeniably. And still he stayed humble. Every night he called his mother before bed. She'd always say the same thing, "Don't forget who you are, baby." And he'd always reply, "Never, Mama." But behind the scenes, new storms were forming. The same politicians who once praised him began to grow uneasy. Lobbyists called him a risk. One network accused him of dividing the country. Another accused him of selling out. And somewhere deep inside the Bureau, whispers turned into plans. Because not everyone liked what Malcolm Ross had become. He wasn't just a calm voice anymore. He was a movement. And movements are hard to control. The storm hit without warning. It started on a Tuesday morning. Calm skies, quiet office, nothing out of place. Malcolm was reviewing reports when his supervisor, Agent Daniels, appeared at his door. "Conference room, now." No explanation, no eye contact. When he walked in, 3 men in suits were already waiting. Not bureau suits, Washington suits. Thick folders, cold stares. One of them wore a pin that made Malcolm's stomach tighten. The Office of Internal Affairs. "Agent Ross," the lead investigator began, "you're under formal review for breach of protocol and unauthorized public engagement." Malcolm blinked. "Breach of... I haven't... You've been making public statements about bureau conduct," the man interrupted, "without clearance. Your online activities have drawn political attention, negative attention." Daniels wouldn't meet his eyes. "I spoke about accountability, about empathy. Since when is that political? Since politicians started quoting you. Since cities began changing policy based on your message, not official training." Another agent slid a paper across the table. It was a suspension notice, effective immediately. "You're relieved of duty, pending review." The words echoed through his head like gunfire. He'd risked his life for this badge, bled for it, defended it. And now, for speaking truth, they wanted to take it away. When he got home that night, the house felt smaller than usual. His mother was waiting at the kitchen table, Bible open, glasses on. He dropped the envelope beside her. "They suspended you," she whispered, scanning the paper, "for telling the truth?" He nodded. She sighed deeply, closing her Bible. "Baby, they did the same thing to your father when he tried to speak up. Different time, same fear." Malcolm sat down beside her, his jaw tight. "I thought things had changed." "They did. You changed them. That's why they're scared." He looked at her, really looked at her. The lines of resilience carved by decades of faith and struggle. He realized she'd seen this all before, the price of dignity in a world that punished those who refused to bow. She reached for his hand. "Don't you dare let them silence you, Malcolm Ross. The truth's too heavy to carry alone, but too sacred to drop." He didn't reply. He just nodded and squeezed her hand. By Friday, his story leaked. "FBI agent suspended for anti-police comments," one headline sneered. "Bureau hero turns rogue activist," another claimed. Cable pundits dissected his every word again, but this time they weren't applauding, they were dismantling. Clips from his speech were twisted out of context. One anchor shouted, "He's not inspiring reform, he's inciting rebellion." His inbox flooded with hate mail, death threats, racial slurs, even letters addressed to his mother. He tried to ignore it, but it burned through his calm like acid on glass. Until one night, as he scrolled through messages, he found one that made him stop cold. "Keep talking, and we'll make sure your mother's house burns next." He sat back, staring at the screen. His pulse slowed, dangerously calm. He'd seen threats before, but not like this. He called Cynthia Morales. She answered on the first ring. "I saw the news." "It's worse than news," he said quietly. They're coming after my family. A pause. Then, meet me tomorrow, 9 a.m., Archive Room 4. Don't tell anyone. The next morning, the basement-level archive room felt colder than usual. Cynthia was already there, a tablet in hand. "I've been digging," she said. "You were right. Something's off." She tapped the screen. A network of names appeared. Donors, lobbyists, contractors. At the center of the web was one company, Cortex Systems. "They're the ones funding the fake accounts that boosted your story," she explained. "And they've got federal contracts worth billions." Malcolm frowned. "So they tried to use my face to score political points." "Exactly. But when you started preaching independence, when you told people not to take sides, they turned on you." He leaned closer. "So this isn't about me. It's about control." Bingo. Cynthia looked at him with a mix of admiration and fear. "You've become dangerous to people who build careers on division. That's why they're coming after you." Malcolm exhaled. "Then we go after them." "Careful," she warned. "They're protected. If you make this public, they'll bury you." He looked down at the folder in her hand. "Not if the truth's loud enough." 2 nights later, he did something unthinkable. He went live again. But this time, there was no calm suit, no desk lamp glow, just darkness and his voice. "They suspended me for telling the truth, but they didn't suspend my conscience." He laid everything out: the fake accounts, the manipulation, the billion-dollar contracts behind the chaos. They don't care about justice or unity. They care about control. They want you divided, angry, distracted, because when we're fighting each other, we're too blind to see who's pulling the strings. His tone sharpened. "I've served this country for 15 years. I've worn the badge, followed the orders, kept the peace. But peace without truth isn't peace. It's silence." He paused, eyes burning into the lens. "And I will not be silent." Then he ended the stream. The internet exploded. Within hours, his video hit 200 million views. Protests erupted outside federal buildings demanding transparency. Congress members called for investigations. News anchors scrambled to confirm his claims. And in the middle of that storm, the Bureau went dark. Malcolm's badge was revoked, his access terminated. He became officially a civilian again. But something extraordinary happened. 10 days later, a convoy of black SUVs pulled up outside his mother's house. Neighbors peeked through curtains as doors opened, and 10 figures in suits stepped out. All federal agents. Cynthia led them. "Sir," she said formally, saluting him, "we're here under direct authorization from the director. Cortex under federal investigation. Your data helped us expose them." Malcolm blinked. "You mean," she smiled, "you were right. And you're reinstated if you want to be." He looked past her at the others, agents from different divisions, different backgrounds, all standing in quiet respect. For the first time since the nightmare began, Malcolm felt something deep and unshakable. Not relief, not victory, vindication. The men who once called him criminal were now calling him Sir. And yet, the story wasn't over, because the real test was never about proving his innocence. It was about proving what truth could do, even in a world built to bury it. And that test had only just begun. The morning after the agents arrived, Malcolm woke to silence. No phone buzzing, no hate mail flooding his inbox, just sunlight spilling across his mother's kitchen table and the faint scent of her coffee. For a moment, he almost believed it was over. But peace, he knew, never lasted long for people who told the truth. By 9 a.m., news trucks were already lining the street. Breaking, suspended FBI agent Malcolm Ross cleared, whistleblower behind billion-dollar scandal. The cameras followed him like shadows as he stepped outside. Reporters shouted questions, microphones thrust forward like weapons. "Agent Ross, are you returning to duty? Do you feel vindicated? Are you planning to sue the Bureau?" He said nothing, not because he didn't have answers, but because he didn't trust anyone to listen for the right reasons. When Cynthia arrived with the SUV, she opened the door and murmured, "Don't talk until we're inside." At Bureau headquarters, the mood was strange. Some agents nodded respectfully as he walked past, others turned away, whispering. When he entered the director's office, the man behind the desk stood. "Agent Ross," the director said, voice steady but cautious, "you've put this bureau in the crosshairs of the entire country." "With respect, sir, I didn't put us there. The truth did." The director studied him. He wasn't angry, he was calculating. "You're a national figure now. You've got half of America calling you a hero, the other half calling you a traitor. That's dangerous." Malcolm crossed his arms. "Truth usually is." The director sighed. "We're reinstating you, but understand this. You can't go back to being just another agent. You're a symbol now, whether you like it or not." "I never asked to be a symbol." "Doesn't matter. You became one the moment you stood up." He slid a sealed folder across the table. "Inside is everything we've got on Cortec and the people they paid off. Congress, corporate boards, even a few of our own. You wanted the truth? Here it is." He opened it. The deeper he read, the heavier it got. Names, payments, cover-ups stretching years. It wasn't corruption. It was an ecosystem. "How deep does this go?" he asked quietly. The director met his eyes. "All the way down." That night, Malcolm couldn't sleep. He sat by his window, city lights blinking like restless thoughts. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw faces, people he'd once trusted, people who'd turned their backs, and one question wouldn't stop echoing. "If I stay quiet now, am I any better than them?" He grabbed his phone and opened the messages he'd ignored for days. Thousands of them, from strangers, officers, teachers, veterans. One read, "You gave me courage to tell the truth at my job." Another, "My son wants to be like you. He said not all heroes wear capes, some wear badges." And one that broke him. "My brother was killed because a cop said he looked suspicious. Thank you for reminding the world that we deserve to live too." Malcolm put the phone down and stared at the city skyline. He realized something. The truth hadn't ruined his life. It had revealed his purpose. The next morning, he called Cynthia. "I'm done reacting. It's time to build." She hesitated. "Build what?" "Something that lasts." 2 weeks later, a press conference was announced at the D.C. Convention Hall. No one knew what to expect. When the lights dimmed, Malcolm walked on stage in a dark suit, calm, centered, and unflinching. He paused before speaking, letting the silence grow heavy enough to demand attention. "A few months ago, I was called a criminal. I was handcuffed, humiliated, and condemned, not for breaking the law, but for telling the truth. Today I stand before you not as an agent, not as a victim, but as a citizen of a nation that deserves better." He paced slowly, his voice steady. "We don't need more laws. We need more integrity. We don't need louder voices. We need clearer hearts." The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. "So today, I'm announcing the Ross Protocol, a national initiative for transparency and community accountability in law enforcement. Real oversight, real protection for whistleblowers, real consequences for those who weaponize power against the people they swore to serve. Gasps rippled through the audience. Cameras clicked furiously. Malcolm continued, "This isn't anti-police, it's anti-corruption. It's pro-truth." When he stepped back from the podium, reporters erupted. Some cheered, others shouted. But one thing was certain. He had just changed the national conversation. Later that night, back in the green room, Cynthia found him sitting quietly. "You realize you just painted a target on your back again, right?" He smiled faintly. "I've been living with one since the day I put this badge on." She sat beside him. "So what now?" He looked at the cameras still flashing outside. "Now, we make sure truth doesn't die quietly again." The weeks that followed were chaos. News networks debated him 24/7. Politicians tried to co-opt his message. Law enforcement unions pushed back. But the public didn't let go. #Ross Protocol trended for 40 days straight. High schools taught his speech in civics class. Protesters carried signs that read, "Justice has a new name." And through it all, Malcolm kept his promise, visiting small towns, holding roundtables with cops, mothers, pastors, and activists. He didn't yell, he listened. Everywhere he went, people told him the same thing. "We just want to be heard." One evening, as he was leaving a community center in Atlanta, a young officer approached him, maybe mid-20s, nervous, eyes full of something between guilt and hope. "Sir," the officer said quietly, "I used to be one of the guys who thought you were the enemy." Malcolm tilted his head. "What changed?" The officer swallowed hard. "I saw a video of you talking about your dad, about how he taught you to respect people before judging them. Reminded me of my own. I just wanted to say thank you for reminding me why I joined." Malcolm smiled. "Then maybe we're both learning." The officer nodded. "One more thing. My precinct is adopting your protocol. The chief said it's the first of many." And for the first time in months, Malcolm felt something genuine. Not victory, not fame, but healing. That night, as he flew home, the plane window reflected his tired face, older, wiser, but at peace. He thought about the word criminal, how it had been used to define, destroy, and divide. But now, that same word had given birth to something bigger than revenge. Redemption. He leaned back, whispering to himself, "They called me a criminal once. Now they call me the reason they still believe." Outside, the clouds drifted quietly by, and somewhere far below, a nation began to change. It started with whispers. And Malcolm had learned whispers were louder than gunfire when they came from people you trusted. By late autumn, the Ross Protocol had gone from a local reform effort to a nationwide movement. Universities invited him to speak. Corporations quoted him in campaigns. Even the president mentioned his name during a televised address. "When individuals like Malcolm Ross stand up for truth," she said, "they remind us what America can still be." Applause thundered across the country. But in the shadows, something was beginning to rot. Cynthia noticed it first. "Malcolm," she said one evening, placing a file on his desk, "you need to see this." Inside were emails, internal communications from one of his newly appointed regional directors. The man had been misusing donation funds meant for community outreach, funneling money into personal accounts and political lobbying. Malcolm's stomach turned. "Are you sure these are real?" "I double-checked. He's been selling your image to line his pockets." Malcolm stared at the file for a long time. He'd built the Ross Protocol on transparency, on the belief that truth mattered more than loyalty. But now, the corruption wasn't in Washington or the Bureau. It was inside the movement carrying his name. "The moment you build something pure," his father once said, "someone will show up trying to stain it." He thought it was cynicism. Now he knew it was prophecy. That night, he called an emergency meeting. The room was packed with his core team: advisors, volunteers, donors, media liaisons. The air was thick with tension. "Let's get one thing straight," Malcolm said, slamming the folder onto the table. "This movement is built on honesty. If anyone here thinks they can twist it for profit or politics, walk out now." The accused director, a tall, smooth-talking man named Derek Shaw, stood, pretending calm. "Malcolm, you don't understand. It's just business strategy. We need leverage." "Leverage?" Malcolm's voice cut through him like glass. "You stole from the same communities we're trying to protect." "Those people don't understand how the game works," Derek snapped. "You think truth alone gets results? Wake up, Malcolm. We're in the real world. Politics runs on money and control." The room went dead silent. Malcolm's eyes hardened. "Then you're no better than the men who tried to destroy me." For the first time, Derek's charm cracked. "You think this movement is yours? You think people follow you because of your fancy speeches? Newsflash, they follow you because I made you marketable. I built the Ross brand." Malcolm stood slowly. "Then I'll burn the brand before I let it turn into a lie." And without another word, he called security and had Derek escorted out. The door slammed shut behind him, but his parting words lingered. "You can't fight power without becoming it, Ross. You'll see." By morning, Derek's revenge had begun. He leaked half-truths to the media, edited emails, distorted stories, false accusations that Malcolm had pocketed donations himself. The headlines hit like shrapnel. "Is the Ross Protocol a scam? New hero or new fraud? The truth about the truth agent." Sponsors froze funding. News anchors debated his character. Strangers who once called him hero now called him hypocrite. Cynthia tried to get him to rest. He wouldn't. "They're not after my reputation," he said quietly. "They're after the idea that truth can exist without profit. I need to think." He rubbed his temples. "If they kill that, they win." A week later, a subpoena arrived. Congress wanted him to testify again, not as a whistleblower, this time as a suspect. As he prepared his statement, Cynthia walked in. Her eyes were tired, but her voice was steady. "You don't have to do this," she said. "Let the lawyers handle it." Malcolm shook his head. "No. The first time they tried to silence me, I spoke. If I stop speaking now, everything we built dies." The hearing was brutal. Senators grilled him for hours under the glare of cameras and flashbulbs. "Mr. Ross, did you or did you not authorize payments from the Ross Protocol to unverified accounts?" "No." "Did you personally benefit from any donations made in the past fiscal year?" "Absolutely not." One senator sneered. "You claim to be a man of integrity, yet people in your organization have committed fraud under your watch. How do you explain that?" He leaned into the mic. "The same way I explained it when it happened in the Bureau. Corruption hides behind credibility. The difference is, when I found it, I didn't bury it. I exposed it." The room went silent. Another senator tried to interrupt, but Malcolm didn't flinch. "This movement isn't about me. It's about people who are tired of watching power police itself. If you want to investigate someone, start with the ones who profit off division while pretending to serve unity." Gasps echoed across the chamber. The networks cut to commercial, but by then, millions had already heard it. That night, social media exploded again, but this time not in hate. People replayed his speech on loop. Clips flooded TikTok, Instagram, news feeds. He was trending again, not as a scandal, but as a symbol of accountability. Even the senator who had mocked him earlier was caught on a hot mic saying, "He's dangerous, not because he lies, but because he tells the truth too well." Days later, Malcolm stood before a small press gathering. No teleprompter, no script. "They tried to bury me with lies, but they forgot something. Truth doesn't die. It roots deeper." He looked straight into the cameras, voice calm but unyielding. "If you're watching this, remember, the moment you stand for something real, the world will test you. They'll call you names, strip your dignity, twist your story. But they can't erase your purpose unless you give them permission." The crowd was silent. Then applause, slow at first, then swelling, rolling through the room like a tide breaking the dam. Cynthia stood off to the side, tears threatening. She'd seen him rise, fall, and rise again, not because he was invincible, but because he refused to bow. Later that evening, Malcolm sat alone in the quiet. Outside, the city hummed with traffic and headlines. Inside, peace. He looked at his reflection in the window. Not the hero, not the criminal, not the symbol. Just a man who chose truth and lived with the cost. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "I don't know you, but I watched your hearing. My brother was one of the people you helped expose at the Bureau. He lost everything, but he's rebuilding his life. He says you saved him from himself. Thank you." Malcolm smiled faintly. He typed 2 words back. "Tell him, keep going." And for the first time in months, he leaned back and let the exhaustion melt into gratitude. Because in a world built on noise and lies, he'd learned the rarest sound of all, his own peace. 6 months later, America had changed. Not all at once, not completely, but noticeably. The Ross Protocol wasn't just a phrase anymore. It had become a symbol, taught in police academies, discussed in law schools, quoted in Sunday sermons. It wasn't about one man. It was about what one man refused to do: stay silent when silence was easier. Malcolm Ross had gone from being a headline to a habit, a reminder that truth wasn't convenient, it was contagious. The first real proof came on a humid summer afternoon in Atlanta. 2 rookie officers stopped a young black teen outside a hardware store. They said he fit the description. Before the situation could spiral, one of them froze, spotting the words embroidered on the kid's backpack. #Ross Protocol. Transparency saves lives. The officer stepped back, apologized, let the boy go. That video went viral within hours. By the next morning, Malcolm's face was everywhere again, not in defense, but in gratitude. People were sharing clips, saying, "Because of him, my son came home safe tonight." And this time, even the police were reposting it. Meanwhile, in D.C., something else was happening. Congress had quietly passed the National Accountability Act, inspired directly by Malcolm's testimony. It mandated public reporting for all federal law enforcement misconduct cases. For the first time in history, the system that once crushed him was being rebuilt with the blueprint of his own words. The president called him personally. "Mr. Ross, you've done what we couldn't do for 30 years. You made people listen." He chuckled softly. "No, ma'am, I just made it impossible for them not to." Then came the day no one saw coming. The FBI invited him back, not for questioning, not for show, but for consultation. When he entered Quantico, every head turned. The same halls where whispers once followed him now carried silence and respect. An agent, the same one who once cuffed him outside that mall, approached slowly. "Sir, we never got to say it properly." Malcolm nodded. "Say what?" The agent swallowed hard. "Thank you." The Bureau unveiled a plaque that afternoon in their training division. It read, "The Ross Principle. Truth has no rank. Dedicated to Agent Malcolm Ross, for reminding us that courage and accountability are not opposites. They are the same thing." When the curtain dropped, a standing ovation filled the hall. Some of the toughest men and women in federal law enforcement, people trained to keep emotion buried, wiped their eyes openly. For a long moment, Malcolm couldn't move. He just stood there, staring at the words carved into steel, his reflection shimmering faintly over them. The man once labeled a criminal was now etched into the wall of the agency that had tried to destroy him. Cynthia stepped up beside him, whispering, "You finally made peace with the badge." He smiled. "No," he said, "I made peace with myself." But what truly made him a legend wasn't the medals, the plaques, or the speeches. It was what he did next. Instead of taking consulting contracts or book deals, Malcolm disappeared for 2 months. No press, no statements. When he resurfaced, he was standing on the steps of a small community center in Detroit, the same neighborhood where his father used to work the night shift as a janitor. Behind him hung a hand-painted banner, "The Truth House, a school for second chances." Reporters gathered, expecting politics. Instead, they got something real. Malcolm took the mic. His voice was steady, his tone warm. "I was labeled a criminal before I ever got a chance to prove I wasn't one. I was silenced before anyone asked what I had to say. But here's what I've learned. You can't bury truth under reputation. It always finds air." He paused, looking out at the mix of kids, ex-officers, single mothers, and elders watching from folding chairs. This center isn't about forgiveness. It's about understanding. Because if the people in power listened before they judged, we'd have fewer graves and more graduates. The crowd stood, clapping, cheering, crying. The sound rolled like thunder through the city. For once, it wasn't just applause, it was release. Over the next year, truth houses began popping up in other states: Atlanta, Chicago, New Orleans, and LA. Each one was part mentorship hub, part training space, teaching youth their rights, training officers in de-escalation, and creating dialogues that once felt impossible. And everywhere they went, Malcolm's words hung on the walls. "You can't heal a nation you're afraid to admit is hurting." Then came one last twist of fate. A major television network produced a documentary about his life. They titled it "The Man They Called a Criminal." It aired on a Sunday night, prime time. Across America, millions watched the story unfold, from the mall arrest to the FBI circle, from disgrace to redemption. When the credits rolled, the screen faded to black, and the final message appeared. Sometimes the system doesn't need new laws, it needs new hearts. The country sat silent, and for the first time in a long time, listened. Weeks later, during a morning walk, Malcolm passed a park bench where 2 young black teens were arguing over homework. One looked up and froze. "Hey, wait, aren't you?" Malcolm smiled. "Yeah, probably." The boy grinned. "They told us about you at school. You're the reason our civics class is called the Ross Unit." The other boy added shyly, "They said you taught the FBI how to tell the truth." Malcolm laughed. "Not quite. I just reminded them it still existed." That night he sat on his porch under a sky streaked with orange and purple. The air was warm, the city quiet. He thought of his father, of the night he was tackled outside that mall, of every headline that had tried to erase him. And then he thought of something his mother used to say. When you're called what you're not, keep walking. The truth will catch up. He closed his eyes, smiled faintly, and whispered back, "It finally did, Mama." The story ends with a closing narration, echoing the viral storytelling tone you wanted, something that feels cinematic, righteous, and shareable. They called him a criminal. They mocked his name. They tried to crush his dignity in public. But the same men who once drew their guns on him now stand and salute. Because truth doesn't need permission to rise. It just needs one person brave enough to carry it through the fire. And that person was Malcolm Ross.